Shivering violently on the side of a deserted highway, a woman in scrubs waved down a rusted pickup truck. Thomas thought he was just saving a stranded nurse from a terrible storm. He never suspected she was a billionaire undercover cop, holding a secret that would shatter his entire world. Headlights cut through the blinding sheets of water pouring from the Seattle sky, barely illuminating the treacherous asphalt of Interstate 90. Thomas Harrison gripped the cracked steering wheel of his 1998 Ford F-150, his knuckles white. Exhaustion gnawed at his bones. He had just finished a grueling 14-hour double shift, first turning wrenches at O'Malley's auto repair, then scrubbing floors at Sullivan's diner. At 32, Thomas carried the weight of a man decades older. Since his wife, Catherine, passed away 3 years ago from a sudden aggressive leukemia, he had been drowning in medical debt, fighting tooth and nail to keep a roof over the head of his 7-year-old daughter, Lily. Visibility was dropping to 0. Thomas leaned forward, squinting through the rhythmic sloshing of the worn windshield wipers. Suddenly, a flash of white caught his eye. Standing on the muddy shoulder of the highway, dangerously close to the speeding traffic, was a woman. She was soaked to the bone, her blue medical scrubs plastered to her trembling frame. She was waving her arms frantically, looking over her shoulder into the darkness with wide, terrified eyes. Thomas didn't hesitate. He pulled the heavy truck over, the tires crunching against gravel and mud. He shoved the passenger door open. "Get in!" Thomas shouted over the roaring wind. The woman scrambled into the cab, bringing with her a gust of freezing air and the smell of ozone. She slammed the door shut and pressed herself against the worn upholstery, chest heaving. Her blonde hair was a tangled, dripping mess, and her hands clutched a small, waterproof medical bag like it was a lifeline. "Thank you," she gasped, her teeth chattering. "Oh my God, thank you. My car. It just died a few miles back. I thought I was going to freeze out there." "You're lucky I was taking the back route home," Thomas said, turning up the truck's faulty heater. It blasted lukewarm air, but it was better than nothing. He pulled a clean, albeit faded, flannel shirt from behind his seat and handed it to her. "Here, put this on before you catch pneumonia. I'm Thomas." "Sarah," she replied, slipping the oversized flannel over her freezing shoulders. "I'm a nurse at St. Jude's Memorial. I just got off a terrible shift." "Rough night?" Thomas asked, putting the truck back into gear and merging onto the empty highway. "You have no idea," she whispered, her eyes darting to the side view mirror as if expecting headlights to emerge from the darkness behind them. Thomas lived in a dilapidated apartment complex on the industrial edge of the city. It wasn't much, but it was safe. As he pulled into the cracked parking lot, he glanced at the shivering woman beside him. "Listen, Sarah, I don't have a lot, but my place is warm. My daughter is asleep inside. You can dry off, have some hot tea, and use the phone to call a tow truck or family. I can't in good conscience leave you out here or drop you at a closed gas station." "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice tight. "I don't want to intrude. And honestly, my ex-boyfriend has been harassing me. I was terrified he was following me on the highway. I don't want to bring trouble to your door." "No trouble," Thomas said softly, his natural kindness overriding his exhaustion. "We look out for people in need. Come on." Inside the cramped, chilly apartment, Thomas moved quietly. He checked on Lily, who was sound asleep under a mountain of cheap blankets, her small chest rising and falling evenly. Satisfied, he returned to the tiny kitchenette, where he boiled water on a hot plate and handed Sarah a mug of chamomile tea. He offered her the pull-out couch in the living room, setting out clean towels and an extra blanket. "I'll be in the chair by the window if you need anything," Thomas said, offering a tired but genuine smile. "Lock the door if it makes you feel safer." "Thank you, Thomas." "Truly," she said, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. Hours later, the apartment was completely silent, except for the drumming of the storm against the thin glass. On the pull-out couch, the woman known as Sarah stared up at the water-stained ceiling. Her name was not Sarah. She was Samantha Kensington. At 34, she was the sole heir and CEO of Kensington Enterprises, a massive pharmaceutical and biomedical technology conglomerate worth over $4 billion. She lived in a penthouse overlooking the skyline, flew in private jets, and sat on the boards of international charities. But Samantha harbored a dangerous secret. For the past 8 months, she had been working as an undercover operative and civilian informant for a specialized FBI and DEA joint task force. It started when she discovered massive discrepancies in the inventory of Kensington Enterprises' flagship hospital, St. Jude's Memorial. Highly addictive synthetic opioids and experimental fentanyl analogues were vanishing. When her internal auditors started turning up dead from accidental overdoses, Samantha knew she couldn't trust her own corporate security or the local police precincts. She went straight to the federal level, connecting with Detective Bradley Miller of a specialized corruption unit. Bradley had warned her it was too dangerous, but Samantha refused to let her family's legacy be twisted into a cartel supply chain. She used her resources to fabricate a background as a floor nurse, slipping into the hospital's night shift to gather evidence from the inside. Tonight, her cover had been blown. Dr. Richard Montgomery, the esteemed chief of staff and the mastermind behind the smuggling ring, had caught her accessing his private server. He realized the quiet, unassuming nurse had just downloaded gigabytes of encrypted ledgers connecting him to a violent international syndicate. Montgomery hadn't called security. He had called his fixers. Samantha had barely escaped the hospital parking garage, fighting off a man twice her size before hot-wiring a stolen sedan. The car had broken down on the highway, leaving her stranded and hunted. Lying in the dark of Thomas's apartment, Samantha reached into her medical bag and pulled out the waterproof flash drive. It held everything. The names, the offshore accounts, the delivery routes. It was enough to put Montgomery away for life and dismantle the entire operation. She looked across the small room. Thomas was asleep in the armchair, his head resting awkwardly against the window pane. On the coffee table lay a stack of final notice medical bills and past due rent warnings. Samantha felt a sharp pang of guilt. This man, who had literally nothing, had opened his door to a stranger to keep her safe. And in doing so, he had unknowingly put a massive target on his own back. Morning sunlight struggled to pierce the thick grey clouds hanging over Seattle. Thomas woke up with a stiff neck, blinking away the heavy fog of sleep. He immediately noticed the smell of burnt toast and cheap coffee. Walking into the kitchenette, he found Samantha standing by the counter, holding a plate of slightly charred bread. Beside her, little Lily was sitting on a wobbly bar stool, swinging her legs and giggling. "Daddy," Lily beamed. "Sarah made us breakfast. She said she's a nurse, just like the ones who helped Mommy." Thomas felt a tightness in his chest, but he forced a warm smile. "That was very nice of her, sweetheart. But I'm sure Sarah needs to get going soon to take care of her own things." "Actually," Samantha said, turning to him with an apologetic look, "I tried using your landline, but it seems to be disconnected." Thomas flushed with embarrassment, looking away. "Yeah, I missed the payment this month. Sorry about that. I have to head to the garage for my morning shift, but there's a payphone down at the corner bodega." "Thomas," Samantha said softly, noticing the stack of eviction notices he hastily tried to sweep into a drawer. She had seen the names on the medical bills earlier. Catherine Harrison. The treatments listed were cutting-edge oncology drugs, drugs manufactured by her own company, marked up by the hospital's predatory billing department, which Montgomery oversaw. The realization made her feel sick to her stomach. "You've done more than enough. I'll head out once I get my bearings." Stay as long as you need, Thomas insisted, grabbing his worn jacket and his metal lunchbox. Lily, Mrs. Higgins from next door is going to come sit with you in an hour. Be good. Sarah, lock the door behind me. As the door clicked shut, Samantha exhaled sharply. The domestic tranquility was suffocating because she knew it was a fragile illusion. She moved quickly to her medical bag, pulling out a hidden, encrypted burner phone she kept for emergencies. She powered it on and dialed Detective Bradley Miller's direct line. "Miller," the gruff voice answered on the second ring. "Brad, it's Sam," she whispered, pacing the small living room while Lily watched cartoons on a static-filled television. "My cover is blown. Montgomery knows. I have the ledgers on a drive, but his men chased me out of the city." "Damn it, Sam! I told you to pull out a week ago," Bradley hissed. "Where are you? Are you safe?" "I'm at a civilian's apartment, industrial district. I need extraction, but it has to be discreet. I can't put this family in danger. Send me your pinged coordinates. I'm mobilizing a tactical unit now. Sit tight and stay out of sight." Samantha hung up. She walked over to the window, peering through the dusty blinds. Her heart plummeted into her stomach. Rolling slowly into the cracked parking lot was a black, heavily tinted SUV. Montgomery's men. They must have tracked the GPS on the burner phone the moment she turned it on, or perhaps they had hacked the city's traffic cameras to track Thomas's truck from the highway. Two massive men stepped out of the vehicle. One of them was Derek Gibson, a ruthless former mercenary who handled Montgomery's acquisitions. He reached into his leather jacket, the unmistakable bulge of a suppressed firearm resting against his ribs. They were looking straight at Thomas's apartment door on the ground floor. "Lily," Samantha said, her voice eerily calm, devoid of the soft, frightened nurse persona. "I need you to do exactly as I say. Go into your bedroom, get inside your closet and hide under the blankets. Do not come out until I or your daddy tells you to. Understand?" Lily's eyes widened, sensing the sudden shift in the air. "Is the bad man from your story here?" "Yes, honey. Now go. Quickly." As the bedroom door shut, Samantha moved with lethal precision. The terrified, shivering woman from the highway vanished. In her place stood a woman who had spent the last 2 years training under elite private military contractors and federal tactical instructors to prepare for this exact operation. She grabbed a heavy cast-iron skillet from the stove and flattened herself against the wall beside the front entryway. The lock clicked. A second later, the flimsy wooden door was kicked violently inward, splintering off its hinges. Derek Gibson stepped inside, leading with his suppressed pistol. "Check the back," he growled to his partner. Samantha didn't give them a second to breathe. She swung the heavy cast-iron skillet with explosive force, catching the second thug square in the jaw. The sickening crunch of bone echoed through the room as the man collapsed instantly, out cold. Derek spun around, raising his weapon, but Samantha was already moving. She dropped the skillet, stepped inside his guard, and clamped her hands onto his wrist, twisting it violently upward. The gun fired into the ceiling with a muffled pht. Samantha drove her knee mercilessly into his abdomen, then followed with a brutal elbow strike to his temple. Derek stumbled backward, dazed. Samantha swept his legs out from under him, sending the massive man crashing onto the cheap coffee table, shattering it into pieces. Before he could recover, she snatched the suppressed pistol from the floor and aimed it squarely between his eyes. "Move a muscle, Gibson, and I'll end you right here," she commanded, her voice dropping to a dangerous, icy register. Heavy footsteps pounded down the exterior hallway. "Sarah! Lily!" Thomas burst through the shattered doorway, breathless. He had realized halfway to the garage that he forgot his lunchbox and turned back. He froze in his tracks. His living room was destroyed. Wood shards and broken glass littered the floor. One massive man was bleeding and unconscious by the kitchen counter. Another man was groaning in the ruins of the coffee table. And standing over them, holding a professional-grade firearm with absolute, terrifying competence, was the fragile, terrified nurse he had rescued from the rain. Thomas's lunchbox slipped from his fingers, clattering loudly against the linoleum. "What? What is this?" Thomas stammered, his eyes darting from the gun to her face. "Who are you?" Samantha didn't lower the weapon, but she turned her head slightly to look at the man who had saved her life. The deception was over. "Thomas," she said, her tone steady and authoritative. "My name is Samantha Kensington. I'm not a nurse, and if you want to keep your daughter alive, you need to come with me right now." Shock paralyzed Thomas, his work boots glued to the ruined linoleum of his own living room. He stared at the battered bodies of the two massive intruders, then up at the poised, lethal woman holding a suppressed handgun. This was not the shivering, helpless nurse he had pulled from the freezing highway shoulder. Her posture was rigidly military, her eyes devoid of fear, calculating the angles of the shattered doorway. "Samantha?" Thomas choked out the name, his brain struggling to process the sudden, violent shift in reality. "What are you talking about? Who are these men in my house?" "Daddy!" Lily's terrified voice pierced the heavy silence as the little girl peeked out from the hallway, clutching her ragged stuffed bear. Thomas snapped out of his daze. He lunged forward, scooping his daughter into his arms and pressing her face into his shoulder so she wouldn't see the blood pooling on the floor. "We have exactly 2 minutes before Montgomery's backup arrives," Samantha stated, her tone sharp and commanding. She swiftly stripped the unconscious men of their spare magazines, tossing one to Thomas, who fumbled to catch it. "Grab whatever you need for the next 48 hours. We are leaving right now." Panic gave way to paternal instinct. Thomas didn't ask another question. He grabbed his daughter's backpack, shoved in some clean clothes, and secured his father's old hunting knife from the top shelf of the closet. Racing down the back stairwell of the apartment complex, the trio burst out into the dreary Seattle morning. The rain had subsided into a miserable drizzle, but the cold bit into their skin. Samantha led them through a maze of narrow, trash-strewn alleyways, constantly checking her six. She navigated the industrial district with a practiced precision that deeply unsettled Thomas. Tires screeched at the end of the alley. A massive, matte-black armored SUV slammed to a halt, blocking their path. Thomas instinctively shielded Lily with his body, gripping his knife tightly. "Stand down, Thomas," Samantha ordered softly, lowering her stolen weapon. The rear doors of the SUV flew open. Inside sat Detective Bradley Miller, flanked by 2 heavily armed tactical agents wearing unmarked tactical gear. "Get in, Sam, now!" Bradley roared over the rumble of the engine. Thomas scrambled into the cavernous back seat, pulling Lily onto his lap. Samantha slid in beside them, slamming the heavy reinforced door shut, just as another vehicle, a sleek, silver sedan, tore around the corner, its occupants opening fire. Bullets pinged harmlessly off the SUV's ballistic glass as Bradley's driver floored the accelerator, tearing through the industrial streets and leaving their pursuers in the dust. Inside the safety of the rolling fortress, the adrenaline slowly ebbed, leaving a heavy, suffocating silence. Thomas held his trembling daughter tightly, glaring at the woman sitting across from him. "Talk," Thomas demanded, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and fear. "Right now. You said your name is Samantha Kensington, as in Kensington Enterprises, the pharmaceutical company?" Samantha nodded slowly, her expression softening into genuine regret. "Yes. I'm the CEO. For the past 8 months, I've been working undercover as a civilian informant at St. Jude's Memorial to dismantle a massive drug smuggling syndicate operating out of our supply chain." Thomas felt the air leave his lungs. St. Jude's Memorial. Kensington Pharmaceuticals. The words echoed in his skull like a physical blow. "My wife, Catherine," Thomas whispered, his eyes widening in horror as the pieces clicked together. She was a patient at St. Jude's. Dr. Richard Montgomery was her lead oncologist. He pushed us toward experimental Kensington treatments. We remortgaged our house, emptied our savings, took out predatory loans, and she still died. The treatments didn't do anything. Samantha's face drained of color. Detective Miller swore softly under his breath, looking out the tinted window. "Thomas, I am so deeply sorry," Samantha said, her voice cracking for the first time. Montgomery wasn't just smuggling out the good drugs. My internal audits revealed he was replacing crucial medications with heavily diluted counterfeits and pocketing the difference. He wasn't trying to save Catherine. He was using her as a billing shield to cover his cartel shipments. Tears streamed down Thomas's weathered face. The crushing debt, the double shifts, the eviction notices. It was all built on a foundation of horrific, calculated murder. The man who had promised to save his wife had deliberately sacrificed her for profit. "I have the encrypted ledgers," Samantha said fiercely, leaning forward and placing a hand over Thomas's trembling fist. "I have every offshore account, every fake prescription, every delivery route. I have the evidence to destroy him, Thomas. And I promise you, by tonight, Richard Montgomery will lose everything." The SUV descended into an underground parking structure beneath a towering, glass-fronted skyscraper in downtown Seattle. They were escorted up a private elevator, directly into the Kensington Enterprises' secure penthouse. The sheer opulence of the safe house, vaulted ceilings, panoramic views of the city, and modern art stood in jarring contrast to the dirty, desperate reality Thomas had lived in for years. While a trauma specialist from Bradley's team tended to a wide-eyed Lily, offering her hot chocolate and new toys, Samantha and Bradley set up a mobile command center in the sprawling living room. "Montgomery knows you have the drive," Bradley said, throwing a topographical map onto the marble dining table. "He's panicked. Our wiretaps at the hospital just went dead. He's running." "He won't run empty-handed," Samantha countered, her eyes scanning the digital monitors. "He has over $50 million in untraceable bearer bonds stashed in a private vault at the airfield. He'll try to secure his exit capital before flying to a non-extradition country." "Boeing Field?" Bradley asked, tapping a location on the map. Thomas stepped forward, wiping his face. His grief had hardened into cold, absolute resolve. "No," he said, his voice steady. "Not Boeing Field. If he's moving illicit cargo and trying to dodge the FAA, he's using the old Millers Creek airstrip just outside the county line. I used to work as an engine mechanic out there before I took the job at the diner. It's an unmonitored runway, mostly used by crop dusters and private smugglers. It has a blind spot that radar can't touch." Samantha looked at Thomas, recognizing the fierce determination burning in his eyes. He wasn't just a victim anymore. He was a father fighting for his family's justice. "Show us," Samantha said. Heavy rain began to fall again as the tactical convoy approached the desolate Millers Creek airstrip. The sky was the color of bruised iron. The airfield was virtually abandoned, save for a single, sleek Gulf Stream jet idling near a rusted hangar, its engines whining with a high-pitched roar. Thomas sat in the passenger seat of the lead SUV, a tactical vest strapped tightly over his faded flannel shirt. He had drawn a detailed schematic of the hangar's blind spots, guiding Bradley's assault team through the broken perimeter fence without tripping the antiquated motion sensors. "Montgomery is inside the hangar," Bradley whispered through the comms unit, peering through a thermal scope. "I see 5 heat signatures, 4 armed guards, and our target. He's loading metal briefcases onto a cargo cart." "We need him alive," Samantha's voice cracked over the radio. She was positioned with a flanking unit near the rear loading dock. "The ledgers will put him away, but his testimony will burn the rest of the cartel." "Move in," Bradley ordered. The assault was swift and brutally efficient. Federal agents swarmed the hangar from 3 different access points. Flashbang grenades shattered the dim lighting, filling the cavernous space with blinding white light and deafening thunder. "FBI, drop your weapons!" Gunfire erupted, the sharp cracks echoing off the corrugated metal walls. Thomas stayed low behind a stack of rusted oil drums, his heart hammering against his ribs. He watched as the tactical team systematically neutralized Montgomery's heavily armed mercenaries. But amidst the chaos, Dr. Richard Montgomery, clutching a silver briefcase, scrambled up a steel gantry staircase toward the hangar's roof access. He was trying to reach a secondary helicopter pad. "He's making a run for the roof!" Thomas yelled into his radio. Without waiting for backup, Samantha broke from her cover and sprinted toward the stairs, taking the metal steps 2 at a time. Thomas didn't hesitate. Driven by the memory of Catherine's suffering, he abandoned his safe position and followed Samantha up the narrow catwalk. The roof of the hangar was slick with rain and grease. The wind whipped furiously, threatening to throw them over the edge. Montgomery was desperately trying to unlock the access door to an old helipad when Samantha emerged from the stairwell, her weapon raised. "It's over, Richard!" Samantha shouted over the howling wind. "Drop the case and put your hands on your head!" Montgomery spun around, his expensive suit soaked and ruined. His face was twisted in a snarl of pure desperation. He reached into his coat, pulling out a compact revolver. "You ruined everything, you little corporate brat!" Montgomery screamed, aiming his weapon wildly. Before he could pull the trigger, Thomas burst onto the roof. He didn't have a gun, and he didn't care. He launched himself forward with the sheer, unbridled force of a man who had nothing left to lose. He tackled the corrupt doctor with devastating momentum. Both men crashed violently onto the unforgiving roof, the silver briefcase skittering away and bursting open, spilling millions of dollars in bearer bonds into the muddy puddles. The revolver clattered across the metal grating. Montgomery threw a desperate punch, catching Thomas in the jaw, but Thomas barely felt it. He grabbed Montgomery by the lapels of his ruined suit, hauling him halfway off the ground, his fist raised. "This is for Catherine!" Thomas roared, his knuckles white. "Thomas, no!" Samantha yelled, rushing forward and grabbing his arm. "Don't do it! Don't let him turn you into a murderer! We have him! His life is over!" Thomas held his fist suspended in the air, trembling violently. He stared down into the terrified, pathetic eyes of the man who had destroyed his family. Slowly, agonizingly, Thomas lowered his hand. He shoved Montgomery back onto the wet roof in disgust. "You're not worth it," Thomas spat. Bradley Miller and his agents flooded the roof a moment later, securing Montgomery in heavy iron cuffs and dragging him away as he shouted empty threats into the storm. The operation was a massive success. The encrypted ledgers Samantha secured led to a sweeping federal indictment, dismantling one of the largest pharmaceutical smuggling rings in North American history. 2 weeks later, the sun was shining brightly over Seattle. Thomas stood on the balcony of a beautiful, spacious townhouse in a quiet, safe suburb. The crushing weight of the medical debt was gone. Kensington Enterprises had thoroughly audited St. Jude's Memorial, entirely refunding the predatory bills and establishing the Catherine Harrison Foundation, an initiative dedicated to providing free, high-tier medical care to low-income families. The door to the balcony opened, and Samantha stepped out, holding 2 cups of coffee. She was no longer wearing the muddy scrubs or the tactical gear. She looked radiant, dressed in an elegant but simple sundress. "Lily is officially enrolled in the Kensington Academy." Samantha smiled, handing him a mug. "She's incredibly smart, Thomas. She's going to do amazing things." "I don't know how to thank you," Thomas said, looking out over the peaceful neighborhood. "You gave us our lives back." "You saved my life on that highway," Samantha replied softly, stepping closer and resting her head gently against his shoulder. "I think it's fair to say we saved each other." As they stood together, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues of gold and purple, Thomas knew the storm was finally over. The struggles of his past had forged a new beginning. and for the first time in years, he looked forward to tomorrow. Did this story of a poor single dad risking everything to save a stranger, only to uncover a billionaire's secret, keep you on the edge of your seat? If you loved this thrilling tale of dramatic twists, karmic justice, and the power of unexpected kindness, please like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more incredible real-life storytelling.